It's year one for Mike Macdonald as the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. What should we expect? We're examining the state of the Seahawks roster today on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Crabbs from Locked On Dolphins. And we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to issue a big thank you, shout out, and welcome to our everydayers. Those of you who make Locked On NFL Scouting your first listen every day, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much.
Joe, another bird mascot team today. There's a lot of these across the league, and we're doing one of two in the NFC West. Our first of two in the NFC West over the next 2 days of the show. So it's going to be a very bird-heavy show. No blue-footed boobies, though.
No.
The best bird ever, blue-footed booby.
Blue-footed booby might be able to beat up a cardinal, right? Like, you think about it, just a pretty red bird. I mean, are these fierce? Are these, I mean.
The mascot tries.
Right, but, I mean, a Seahawk, an eagle, a falcon, right. Birds of prey. Oh, a cardinal. Cardinal. Beautiful. Love to see those in the backyard. So does my daughter. Red.
You know what we have over here?
What?
Bluebirds. You
right.
got with the orange chest and
they're
beautiful. The navy blue, about the same color blue as your hat.
Yeah, maybe a little lighter though, right?
No, not the ones we have up here.
Oh, is that a blue jay? Are you sure it's not a blue jay?
Bluebird, yeah.
All right.
I know the difference between a bluebird and a blue jay. I am the resident bird watcher between the two of us.
Right. Yeah, little known fact. Kyle's into bird watching.
Not really a bird watcher, but
I don't know. Seattle Seahawks, the 12s. Welcome. We're glad you're here. Your team is under the microscope today. Yeah, as we microscopic, you know what I mean? Microscope. We've been putting every team through the microscope. This is NFC West week. We've done the 49ers and the Rams. Today is the Seahawks. Tomorrow's the Cardinals. And on Friday, we are going to rank all the position groups within the division. That should be a lot of fun. But Kyle and I have taken the time to study your football team. We've researched it. We've come to you with grades on every single player on the roster. They will be in one of the buckets that we have, which would be a roster cornerstone, quality starter, rookie, adequate starter, replacement level player, quality depth, or non-roster caliber, incomplete evaluation, or a practice squad developmental player. And through this, each player gets a numerical value assigned. It's weighted by positional importance. And at the end of this project, we will have a consistently graded numerical score on every single roster in the NFL. So Seattle, you're up today.
So we're going to start on the offensive side of the ball and look at a team that I think the construction of the roster is one thing, but if you had to ask me what the most interesting storyline was, it's probably Ryan Grubb as the offensive coordinator making the leap to the NFL, right? I mean, he's very successful at Fresno State and Washington the past 2 seasons with Michael Penix. And I think you think about what Geno Smith's strengths are as potentially a vertical passer and the ability to move around a little bit and maybe some of the parallels with how Penix played it at Washington. And I think you see the vision there. Absolutely. 3 coveted wide receivers to go with the parallel with Washington as well. But I think that's the number one most fascinating thing. And I know that's not really where our focus is today, but I wanted to make sure I brought that up just because I see the parallels with the rosters that Grubb got to work with, but that to me is a really intriguing leap when you consider was offensive line coach at Eastern Michigan from 2014 to 2016, and then at Fresno State from 2017 to 2021, and then assistant head coach and offensive coordinator the past 2 years at Washington.
Yeah, I had this on my notes as well. fascinating, right? First year in the NFL. Welcome. You're the offensive coordinator for the Seattle Seahawks. Geno Smith's your quarterback. You got 3 good-looking receivers, some talent at running back, and some things that need to come together with the offensive line. But it's I can appreciate taking a swing, right? Like so many retreads and just recycled coordinators. Like, let's go get a guy that obviously elevated so much of what Washington has been offensively. Like, you remember the Jimmy Lake days as the head coach? It was kind of rough to watch that offense, man. It was tough. Ryan Grubb infused that offense, and obviously Michael Penix, decent player at Indiana, like superstar at Washington. This is very intriguing. I'm really interested in the offensive line and how this comes together. I think you feel great about the trajectory of Charles Cross at left tackle. Laken Tomlinson presents a very high floor as a starting left guard. Don't know about the rest of it though, Kyle Crabbs. We got Double O here at center. Was kind of a mid-round draft pick. He has the opportunity to take over that. The starting 3 from last year, gone, no longer here. So new starters. And then Christian Haynes, probably the right guard. Maybe Anthony Bradford is a guy who got some run last year as a draft pick last year, is in competition there. But then you look at this right tackle situation, and you loved what Abe Lucas gave you as a rookie. But then coming out of his rookie season, the shoulder, coming out of last season, the knee, just it doesn't feel like there's a lot of good vibes with the overall health of Abe Lucas. Now, great job bringing George Fant in as a nice hedge there. But I think your ceiling, when you're looking for how this group really elevates itself, I think it's Abe Lucas being healthy and continuing, to build upon what he showed as a rookie. So you got some answers here, but it's got to come together for this offensive line.
Yeah, a lot of new, right? And I think that's the thing that I'm most worried about for Seattle, particularly in the first 2 months of the season. A new head coach, new offensive coordinator, has never been at the NFL level before, new defensive scheme, a lot of new on your offensive line. And if Abe Lucas can't put it together, you're potentially looking at 3.5 new starters on the offensive line. I mean, Olatimi was there last year, but
new scheme too.
New scheme, right? So a lot of new. And I think that's the thing for Seattle, how quickly they can circumvent that and get some chemistry going, I think is going to be a really defining factor in the first 2 months of their season. The good news, this is a really, really good group of skill players between DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, very well-established players with a lot of production. A couple of young guys in Jaxon Smith-Njigba is a first-round pick who showcased exactly what you thought he was going to show you as far as like winning from the slot and being a reliable player with good hands. Kenneth Walker, I really love his game. Obviously, there's a violence that he runs with good contact balance, but linear open field explosive speed that comes with that as well. And I think about Laken Tomlinson and Christian Haynes as your guard combo here. They do have the potential, I think, to move some bodies in between the tackles and kind of give you a chance to spring some explosive runs. But Kenneth Walker does have the speed to the edge as well. And can I just say, I'm happy for Seattle fans that Noah Fant is back. But Noah Fant, I want to know, and I know they paid you, why'd you come back to be the 5th option in this offense? Like, I think there's another level that Noah Fant can tap into and become as a player. And I think you saw a lot of that last year. It felt that it was his best year as a pro. But with so many mouths to feed, I don't know that you're going to get the player that I think he's capable of being, because you do have a lot of bodies in the backfield, including a player that we're both high on in Kenneth Walker. And you got 3 wide receivers that are definitive players that you want to feed the ball to. So it's a good problem to have. But I selfishly, as somebody who loved Noah Fant coming out of Iowa, I was hoping he'd go somewhere and be like the 3rd option in the passing game as compared to probably the 4th and half option in the passing game.
If there's a silver lining for that, is the rest of this tight end room has been flipped upside down. And I don't think there's going to be as much competition from that group in particular, with no Colby Parkinson, with no Will Dissly as part of this mix, bringing in Farrell Brown and then a draft pick in A.J. Barner. Hopefully that gives all of the tight end production to Noah Fant, who can really be an X factor for this group. So the offensive line's got to come together. We got a new coordinator. We got good skill players. And then there's the Geno Smith situation at quarterback. And you kind of wonder, what is this team capable of with Geno Smith, who I think has some nice high-level moments, and there's a lot to like about Geno Smith. But I think at the same time, he has his own situational blunders as well. And so I'm very curious to see how he aligns with Ryan Grubb, and I feel like maybe you can find some similarities in the way that Michael Penix played and feel good about how they can attack defenses, but can Geno Smith maximize what's around him, and can the offensive line be good enough in front of him?
Yeah, I think that's the big question offensively for Seattle as they, try to instill this new scheme, but they have an identity that I think you can lean on, and I think there's some continuity with the kinds of players that they went after on the offensive line, which I think will be helpful too for them to kind of streamline that process as much as you can. But as we alluded to, I think I would like Seattle a lot more as a team in December than I probably will in September.
Yeah, no doubt about that. All right, we're going to shift gears to the defensive side of the football on the other side of it, so be sure to stick with us. Today's podcast is brought to you by Yahoo Finance. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or are looking for that extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data that you need in one place. They are the #1 finance destination, producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. You can securely link your brokerage accounts for a unified view of your wealth, including 401k and other investments. A comprehensive perspective is what sets apart great investors, and it's how Yahoo Finance ensures you have the insight to look at your wealth in its entirety. With a community of over 90 million users each month, their real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. For a comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com. That's the #1 financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com.
Defensively for Seattle, I think it's the young talent that I'm the most excited about. And knowing that it gets to work with Mike Macdonald.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. How familiar are you with what Mike Macdonald has been able to do that has allowed him to be such a successful defensive play caller? Are you aware of the slot machine analogy?
I don't think I know the slot machine analogy.
So the slot machine analogy, and he did this on it was a coaching clinic that he did with Chris Vassar, Coach Vass, who does excellent work. And he talked about the concept of the slot machine analogy is how they package their defensive calls. And it's each column of the slot machine.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the first column is the personnel group. And the second one is whether it's a pressure or not pressure. And the third one is who the pressure play is just, I'm paraphrasing what he does, but all of their calls between all of the schools of thought that he's been around and been touched by, he blended them all into and effectively bucketed in a very efficient way all of their pressures and sim pressures and base packages and all of that. And I think the #1 bit of feedback that's consistently coming out of that is how easy the scheme is for players to learn because of the way that he presents the information. And I think about that with young players like Boye Mafe, Riq Woolen, Devon Witherspoon. You get Byron Murphy coming in this year as a first-round pick. It's the young players for me that I'm the most excited about, and to know that young players are getting a defensive scheme that's effective. It's cutting edge as far as what the league is all about these days, but the presentation and the learnability, and that's not a word, and I'm aware of that it's not a word, but the learnability of it is very
sounds like a word to me. I'm not fighting you on that.
Is what I'm so excited about for Seattle and the players that they have that can kind of be and continue to develop into cornerstone type players for them.
Learnability, definitely a word.
Is it?
Yeah.
That's a big win.
Yeah. Take it.
Not an English guy.
Not an English. What are we? Football guys, I guess.
Football guys, I guess.
Yeah, it doesn't take hard or it's not hard to figure out going back and looking at Baltimore and all the players that had the best seasons of their career under Mike Macdonald and realize that he's got something going in the sauce there. And I'm excited, like you mentioned, for a lot of the talent and their opportunity with Mike Macdonald. The front is fascinating to me, where I just feel like there's so many options. Look at this edge rusher group of Uchenna Nwosu, who was it 11 games he missed last year with a pectoral injury. We saw what he can do in 2022. He's back. Boye Mafe coming off a 9-sack season, 800 snaps played. Every time I watched Seattle, this dude was popping left and right. Mm-hmm. I think you have a nice sub rusher in Darrell Taylor, and then Derrick Hall is a recent second-round pick. I'm excited to see what these guys can do with Mike Macdonald, because, man, he got so much out of that edge group in Baltimore. Not to mention what's on the interior here with, of course, Leonard Williams coming back, who's a stud. And you have Byron Murphy as a first-round pick, Dre'Mont Jones, who gap shooter, athleticism. Jarran Reed is a tank there in the middle of the defense, not to mention Jonathan Hankins. Like, you're loaded here. And I think there's going to be guys that emerge.
Is this the deepest 9-man front? Like, this might be the deepest 9-man front in football. I'm not saying it's the best, because I think that, there's more elite players and combinations of elite players. But if you just say, hey, list your 1 through 8 or 1 through 9 on your defensive front, like, you're getting guys at 8 and 9 in this group that are probably 5 and 6 for some other lines across the league.
In 6 weeks, I'll definitely have an answer for you. Right now, I feel like Cleveland. Cleveland feels like it might be close, but I don't think it's this deep.
I don't think it's this deep. I think Cleveland's is just, if you had to ask me to pick one, probably better. But I think this is the deepest one, because that was Garrett,
Smith, Okwankwo, Alex Wright.
So the fourth edge rusher is Alex Wright, which I would give the lean to what Seattle has.
You take the top 2 with Cleveland, though.
Right. And then Dalvin Tomlinson, Shelby Harris, Michael Hall, and Quentin Jefferson, it's a good group.
Yeah, but there's 2 more.
Seattle's got
Hankins
2 more.
And Cam Young was 5 and 6 here. Like, what are we doing?
Right.
Insane. You're hoarding all the defensive linemen, Seattle. It's very smart of you. Very smart of you.
Well, and that's a good thing, because that scheme does a lot of rotation.
Yeah.
They had 2 guys play more than Mike Macdonald had 2 defensive linemen that played more than 40% of the defensive snaps, and 1 guy that played more than 55% of the defensive snaps last year. So they need the bodies, and that's ready-made with this group.
Right.
And that's great for them. Now, I think the rest of it, there's some questions. I like what they have on the outside as a pair of corners that have some length and physicality, right? In Riq Woolen and Mike Jackson. Devon Witherspoon was terrific as a movable piece in the secondary. You expect him to kind of not do all the things that Kyle Hamilton did, but just as far as, like, if you had a secondary weapon that you can move all over the place and really weaponize him in a lot of different ways, I think that's what your expectations are for Devon Witherspoon. My biggest question is the middle of the field coverage abilities beyond Devon Witherspoon, with Rayshawn Jenkins is a new player in the secondary at safety. Julian Love's become a really solid and reliable starter. But then the linebacker room's been completely overhauled. That, I know overmade's not a word. I know that for a fact.
I'm not
Go ahead and tell me I'm wrong.
Are you sure?
Go look it up.
Oh boy. Are we assuming that's one word, overmade?
Overmade, yeah. Not a word.
It's there's a company named Overmade. They're an engineering company.
Hashtag no free pub, so we're going to move on.
Yeah.
Tyrel Dodson, Jerome Baker, Drake Thomas, and Tyrese Knight, projected top 4 linebackers. That's a lot of new there, and some new blood. So how they build chemistry with each other as far as playing behind this defensive front, and how they're able to tackle tight ends and slot receivers. And I think that's a big question that I have for the defense in year 1.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think there's a lot to like about this linebacker pair of Tyrel Dodson and Jerome Baker, but I can certainly speak to Tyrel Dodson, and his journey to this point has been very interesting. Finally got a chance to really play this past season as the Bills had some significant injuries at linebacker. And I thought the Bills did a very good job of getting the best out of Tyrel Dodson in terms of what he does, playing downhill, shooting some gaps, playing into the line of scrimmage. He's a very, very good run-stopping linebacker. Where he is lacking in terms of coverage range, right? You don't want him as a big-time space player and having to carry routes, right? That's where he's going to be in trouble. And the Bills had to kind of reinvent their defense a little bit to overcome that, where all of a sudden Jordan Poyer played linebacker for the Bills on long and late downs, and Tyrel Dodson came off the field. I don't really see the path for Tyrel Dodson not hurting this team on passing downs, because I don't see that personnel grouping. Maybe it's Kayvon Wallace, but he's kind of bounced around a little bit. But I think they're going to have to figure that out. And then Jerome Baker, I thought he had his best year of his career this past season, had an injury right later on that, kind of wondering what that status is.
He had a wrist injury, so he should be fine. It was a bummer. He had a knee against Washington where it looked like he blew his knee out, and it was only
okay.
Only an MCL sprain. So he missed 4 weeks, went on IR, and they came back and broke his wrist at the end of the first half against Buffalo on that tackle down on the goal line.
Heck of a play.
And then played the entire second half with it and then missed the playoff game. So I will say this, Jerome Baker is one of the most intelligent football players that I've been around. I've enjoyed every opportunity that I've had to talk with him at Dolphins training camp the past couple of years. And he is very, very, very highly regarded for his football intelligence. So I think that in this defense will be very helpful. I think his contrast of strengths versus Jordan Brooks, who ironically enough went to Miami,
right,
Baker coming to Seattle, is kind of where I think they have a little bit of different strengths. You mentioned Tyrel Dodson and playing him in space not being great. Middle of the field coverage had been a sore spot for Miami, and some of that had to do with Jerome Baker trying to match and plaster and stay sticky on backs and tight ends as well. So I think the pass coverage element there, whether it's Kobe Bryant that steps up or Kayvon Wallace that steps up, or they move Julian Love down and have somebody else play deep, I think that is a little bit of a riddle for them to have to figure out right now.
All right. We are going to bring this conversation to a close on the other side of it, so be sure to stick with us. Kyle, you a couple times mentioned early on about the early season for Seattle and how important that's going to be with so much coaching turnover, new schemes offensively and defensively, the offensive line that's got to come together. Mm-hmm. One of my takes for the Bills, who plays in Seattle this year, is I wanted Seattle week 1 in Seattle. That was the week 1 game that I wanted. Didn't get it. But I think that speaks to exactly what you were talking about. And I think that I think it's important for us. I think it's be worth our time to consider, okay, well, what does Seattle have early on? And I think there's a couple of things to like, but then it gets a little off the rails. I think you love opening at home with Denver, right? That's a great team to play week 1 if you're Seattle. And then a road trip against New England Patriots, phenomenal, right? Like that's great. You got a chance to be 2-0. But then you host Miami. Then you go to Detroit.
On Monday night.
On Monday Night Football. Don't like either of those matchups for you. All right, you get the Giants after that back at home, and then you get the Niners, right? And then it's Atlanta, Buffalo, the Rams, the Niners again. Like once we get to week 3, man, it gets real tough real quick for them.
Well, I actually don't mind the first. Obviously, I think at Detroit, week 4 is probably the toughest draw.
Or Miami with extra rest. I mean, I know that Mike Macdonald got a chance to play that offense last year, but
at least you're coming home.
Well, pause. Fascinating game, because you have Rashad Weaver, who was
Anthony Weaver.
Why did I call him Rashad? Nobody will ever know. Anthony Weaver as the defensive coordinator in Miami, who was under Macdonald the last couple of years in Baltimore. Now, That's fascinating. You're going to know each other's schemes, you would think a little bit.
Yep.
And then of course, Macdonald played against this offense last year, and I'm sure that's going to be very inspiring for both sides of that equation.
And the Jordan Brooks, Jerome Baker revenge game.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Who knew? This was appointment television here.
So I still think going to Detroit for a primetime game is probably a tougher draw. At least you get Miami, even though they do get the extra rest coming to the West Coast, which I think is as far as of a non-international travel trip as you can make in the NFL, is Miami at one polar end of the country to
corner there, yeah.
Seattle, the other polar end. And at least you get San Francisco at home on a Thursday.
Yeah, if there's a time to get them, right?
Right. So, and once you get past the San Francisco game, you're probably going to be far enough into the season where, like, a lot of the concerns with chemistry, and as long as they don't deal with a lot of injuries and inconsistency, you can at least say, well, at least in theory, by midseason, you should have enough time on task where kind of you'll see things start to come together a little bit. So I think through the Thursday game with San Francisco, I think is where some of my biggest questions are. But you're right. When you look at the degree of difficulty, you have some winnable games early, but then at Atlanta, Buffalo, Rams, at San Francisco, back half of October and end of or beginning of November is a really tough draw for you. I actually think I like each of the polls more than I like the middle of the schedule for them as far as degree of difficulty.
Yeah. Start and end, the extreme start and extreme finish is good. And then it gets a little dicey in the middle. This is also a fascinating. Go ahead.
I was going to say, we have to come to consensus on one player.
Let's do that.
I think we've already done it, but like it was a player that there was a lot of, you and I had some pre-show discussion on, and it was kind of bucketing Kenneth Walker, who's been very productive through his first 2 seasons. We've been very complimentary and we like him. I think we're going to put him in the quality starter bucket. But the question was, you consider this front office and some of the other investments that they made at the running back position. They've always kind of felt like a team that likes to invest a lot at back and be deep at running back. And they're deep at running back again. But I thought Kenneth Walker from year 1 to year 2 had about the same yards from scrimmage, and I think he had the same amount of touchdowns in each of his first 2 seasons. I thought he showed a little bit more growth in the passing game. I want to see him continue to be a little bit more effective without the ball in the passing game, as far as like pass protection and getting better in that regard. And I think that's where he can really take his game to another level. But I just look at the physical skill set, and it's kind of like the inverse of the conversation we had yesterday with Jarran Williams, right? Who, I don't know if you saw that, but we talked about the Rams yesterday, and then Jarran Williams not partaking in OTAs and should be back in time for training camp. But the injury list there is kind of starting to be concerning for Jarran Williams. Kenneth Walker, I think with his build, is a little bit more friendly to be a continued volume player. And I just want to give that conversation that we had in the pre-show about figuring out like what bucket do we want to put him in a little bit of time here on the show.
Yeah, I think Ken Walker's a fun player to watch. Obviously, he's been very productive through 2 seasons. The explosive plays really, really stand out. I think one of the narratives with Ken Walker has been the feast or famine nature of some of his rushing, where it's either an absolute monster run or negative play, and there's some negative runs that you kind of have to live with him. So I think that's where he becomes a little bit of Jekyll and Hyde. But I think you take the highs and hopefully, the offensive line can stabilize, the scheme can stabilize, and you can really, enjoy what you have there. Love the compliment that Zach Charbonnet could be as well to him. But I think, sometimes it's taking the grimy 3 and, having some dirt. You're going to have dirty runs in the NFL, but like, don't create dirty runs because you're always chasing a big run.
Yeah.
So
one thing I will give him credit for is 1 fumble in 2 seasons on over 500 touches. Ball security's been real good for him too. So there's some ancillary elements of that position that is good to go along with the explosive plays that you referenced.
Yeah, and then Kenny McIntosh is on this team as well, and we know that he had a lot of fans at Georgia.
Yes, he did. You had something else before we wrap?
I'm good.
You're good?
Yep.
Then we're good. That's going to do it for us here on Locked On NFL Scouting. I'm Kyle Crabbs. He's Joe Marino. We appreciate you guys checking out the show. We have Bird Gang tomorrow, I think. Is that right? Bird Gang?
No, I don't know if that's true.
Didn't they have Bird
Gang? It's the Red Sea, I'm pretty sure. I don't know.
Hold on. There's some stuff that has Bird Gang. Hashtag Bird Gang from the Cardinals official account.
I thought they were the Red Sea. I don't know. All right. You're the bird expert. I should have known you had
the least intimidating bird mascot we have tomorrow on the show, which is a dig I think all Seahawks fans can certainly appreciate. And we hope you guys will come back and see us again. You can find us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. But that's it for us today. We're out of here.